Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome along to the Irish NFL show, now proudly part of the Believe Network. I'm delighted to welcome back another friend of the show, Michael-Shawn Dugar, now former beat writer for The Athletic, having moved to national features after covering the Seahawks for 9 years, and recently authoring his latest book, 12 as 1, Mike Macdonald, the Seattle Seahawks and the Making of a Super Bowl Champion. Mike, welcome along.
What's going on? How you doing?
Good. Congratulations on the promotion, Mike. And we're going to get to your new role in a second for The Athletic. But just very quickly, having a look back on a 9-year career covering the Seahawks, I mean, what a special time for you as a guy who was raised in Seattle, Seahawks fan through and through. You had a career covering the Seahawks that was bookended by two of the greatest defenses in modern history. You go from the Legion of Boom to the dark side and finish on a high. Just can you look back on what's been an incredible 9 years for you covering the team?
Yeah, when I got there, I thought I was the problem. When I showed up, Richard Sherman blew his Achilles. Cliff Averill broke his neck. Cam basically broke his neck, and had to medically retire. I was wondering, like, did I break the Legion of Boom? As Darrell Bevell got fired, Chris Richard got fired. My first year on the beat, they didn't make the playoffs after being a perennial playoff team for a little bit there. And so for a while there, as one of the new guys on the beat, it kind of felt like I was always chasing what was already established among a lot of the other writers, whether it's the AP guy and Tim Booth and Curtis Crabtree, who was then at KJR, the radio station, Bob Condotta, Greg Bell, all these guys, Brady Henderson, all these folks, Art Teal, who had already been, covered the Super Bowl, been around, the players knew them, the PR staff knew them. They're also older than me. So it was just like, oh man, how do I fit in here? And then as soon as I get there, the team's not as good anymore. The Rams and the Niners catch up. Like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just be doing this for a while. I'll just own the Seahawks thing for a little bit, because beat writing, it's in an interesting place where there's like two factions of it. There's these people who have these goals of like upward mobility, whether that's within their own company or moving on companies. They want to get to the New York Times or Washington Post or start a national podcast, be a national columnist or whatever. And then you got people who are just like, I'm comfortable on insert beat here for 30 years or whatever it is. I just saw the Ravens guy for ESPN tweeted he's been there for like 27 years covering the Ravens. And there's guys like that all over the country and women as well who have just been on their beat. So I kind of like, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to just be here for 30 years or whatever and 15 coaches and, go through all that or try to move up, and it's something I thought about early on and then kind of just didn't care too much about like post-COVID, because also what needs to happen in a lot of those circumstances, you go look at people who have made like a national jump. Typically they covered some type of like generational talent or generational run, it's like, okay, is that going to happen for me? They just traded Russ, so like then when they win the Super Bowl last year, kind of an unprecedented run as I documented in 12 as 1. It's like, what? Could I just get out of here on this? That might not be bad, not that I was looking to bounce, but when the opportunities come, you got to jump at them as long as they make sense. So like I'm thankful for what the Seahawks did for me because I was researching a lot of people who made like jumps beyond their beat, not just to a bigger beat, but just like beyond the NFL. There's a lot of people who covered like the 90s Cowboys, the 90s 49ers. On the NBA side, it's people who cover Jordan or like Steph Curry Warriors. A lot of those people who are on beats in the Bay Area covering them they're national now, a lot of them, including people at the Athletic. So, people who covered the Patriots, Tom Brady's Patriots, Bill Belichick's Patriots have gone national. So it's like, okay, how do you get there? So when they started getting hot, I'm like, okay, this might be a thing. So that's why I try to do like my best work every year. But I was glad that I did what I felt like was some of my best work in 2025, and it got recognized. You know, if I don't win any awards or anything, I don't really care. But you know, a lot of people just uh were able to acknowledge that I did a lot of great work, which is always what I'm trying to do. And then to cap it off with a book, I was like, this is perfect. 9-year run book on the Super Bowl team of my hometown. Yeah, man, it's great. So I owe the Seahawks a lot.
Yeah, you give a lot of credit to the Seahawks, but I'm sure that jump to national features is a testament to the work that you've done and the hard, the hours that you've put in. As I said, you moved to national features, and I'd like to get your insight into what that will entail for you and how your career moves forward. But just looking back, it must be a little bit bittersweet because you've had that connection. I met you, I had the pleasure of meeting you in San Francisco. You were so thrilled for the Seahawks, and and you celebrated their success with them. You've been an internal part of that organization in a way. You've been attached to that organization for so long. You had your podcast, Seahawks Man to Man, that comes to an end. Is it a little bit bittersweet that you kind of move out of that nest, so to speak, and move on and move on to national features as opposed to just covering the Seahawks?
Yeah, it's bittersweet mostly for the Seahawks Man to Man podcast because we did that for 9 years as well. And I love Chris, and that's my guy. And that was a hard call for us to make, the right call,
Yeah.
I think, just because I'm not in the locker rooms anymore and stuff. And the other bittersweet part, yeah, it's just the interactions, like I was telling a lot of those guys from the 2022 class, the draft class on the Seahawks, like how happy I was for them, to have been there when they were drafted, because there wasn't that many guys on the team this year who I was there when they drafted. Maybe there were, but in terms of guys who were playing, like I wasn't there, for instance, for Ernest being drafted or Drake Thomas or Julian Love or Leonard Williams or Jaron Reed or Chenna Nwosu. Like I'm naming DeMarcus Lawrence, Josh Jobe, that's most of the defense, the dark side. I don't remember hearing their name on draft day and talking to them. Whereas like I felt something different for Boye Mafe and Kobe and Reek. And even Spoon and Jackson D Hall in that 2023 class. Zach, even though he didn't play, K9. So, that was like when I was dapping those guys in the locker room, I was thinking like, oh man, like this just is a rewarding part of the job to see that through. Even, I think the longest hug I probably shared with anyone in there was Shaquille Griffin. He's in the first draft class I ever covered. Me and him are, I'm only a few years older than him. And, when I met him, I think he was single. I know his brother didn't have any kids. I was the same way. I think I maybe single for like a little bit of that. Didn't have any kids. And now when he comes back to the Seahawks, we're both in our 30s. We both have kids. We're both married. It was just kind of cool to kind of share that. And you lose that when you're not in the locker rooms. I probably won't be in a lot of them anymore. But the good side of that is I can try to build that stuff with people around the league. I'm not confined to just one space. When I went to the Commanders locker room, I think it was last season, to give Bobby his book. I had a signed copy for Bobby that I wanted to give to him in person. So after they beat the Commanders, I went in there and I remember thinking, man, this is the first time I've been in a visiting, like the other locker room for the home team. I've been in the visiting one in Lumen Field. That's nothing. But like to be in another team's home, that's the first time. And that was in year 9 on the beat. So I was like, I think about that moment a lot. It's like I do need to branch out a little bit. And this is, I think, a good time to, and I'm not leaving. So if they make another run to the bowl, I'm right here. But I spread my wings a little bit. I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, those relationships that I built over time, a guy like Quandre as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him, Tyler Lockett. Those guys, it was cool to build those relationships, and that's just going to be harder in this new role. But I just build them in a different way. I think that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, bittersweet but exciting nonetheless. So, what does next season or this coming season look like for you in terms of logistics? Is it a whole lot of travel, or are you basing yourself back in Seattle? Are you moving around? How does life change straight away?
Yeah, good question. I think that the way I've been explaining it to people is like before I was on a newspaper cadence in terms of production. Newspaper comes out every day, for the most part. And Sunday is the big day, usually the big section of a newspaper. And now I'm more like on a magazine cadence, quarterly, monthly, I think that's probably the best way that people can grasp it, even if they're not in the journalism world, so I may have one story in a month. I may have two, I may have 5 stories in 3 months. It just kind of just depends on who I can get access to, who answers the phone, what's kind of going on around the league. Is there something I need to jump on quickly? There's a lot of variables, but it's just a slower pace, not as much travel, which I actually like. I got small kids, right upstairs right now. I got my son just turned 1, my daughter just turned 3, so like traveling was very cool. I think I've only not been to 3 NFL stadiums, so I've been around the country quite a bit and around the world. I've been to Germany, London for work as well. So I'll only kind of miss that part of it. But let's say I have a story on Travis Hunter or something like that, I'll go to Jacksonville, spend some time with them. I'll do that type of stuff on a need to travel basis, basically. Again, think of it like a magazine writer. It's like you got the sit down interview where you're working, you follow that boxer to his training before the big fight, or you go sit in the studio with that artist before they go on tour, release the thing. That's kind of my role now. Like, it's not magazine writing, it's more so of a cadence. And I think another subtle thing, at least the way I'm approaching stories, is The Athletic is owned by the New York Times, but not all of our stories run in the physical edition. It's kind of like a gold star when we get, something we run on The Athletic also gets printed. So I want all my stories to get printed. That means I want them to be good, reach a national audience, have interest beyond the X's and O's. So even though I'm a nerd, I think you probably will see less of me writing stories that involve using like EPA or, any advanced metrics, and more so stuff like I did on Ernest during the last year, where you kind of get at the who a person is or what makes them tick, or kind of interpersonal stuff. Not to say I'm not going to care about numbers anymore, but at least that's kind of how I'm approaching it now in mid-August. Maybe that changes by mid-September, but at least right now, that's kind of how I'm going and looking at it.
Yeah, we hear an awful lot about EPA. We hear a lot about the stats, but I think it's really making that connection to the players is what endears people to these stories. And I mean, you look at Hard Knocks and what that's doing for the Seahawks now, and looking at the connections between the players and coaching staff. Like this time last year, Mike, you generously came on to to the Irish NFL show again, and we met for the first time. And by the end of it, you weren't. I wouldn't say you were beating the Seahawks drum with your chest out, but you were quietly and cautiously optimistic about what the Seahawks could be. And this was preseason again last year. You spoke highly of the likes of Nick Emanwari. You were very hopeful about the run game. What was it like being on the inside track, progressing through that season, and and coming to terms with the fact pretty early that this could actually be a reality here? This could be the breakthrough season for the Seahawks again.
Yeah, it kind of hit me in stages. I think I talk a little bit about this in 12 as 1 as well, but like different things I was skeptical of, I was able to check those boxes at different points. So for instance, Jax as a wide receiver 1. I was like, okay, I like Jax. I think he's very talented. I think being a wide receiver 1 is very hard. So let's see if he can do it. Came back from Green Bay. I said, oh, yep, we're good. That box is checked. Even though Green Bay's secondary and their defense wasn't nothing really to write home about, this is also pre-Micah Parsons trade. I was like, I don't care. I watched him live against another team. I saw all I needed to see. They could not stop that dude. He'll be fine. So like I checked that box, and I think I was already high on the defense, but I'm trying to think of what game I came around on the defense. It's good. Now I can't even think. Probably the first Rams game, maybe. I was already high on them, healthy. And they weren't for quite a while, but I just felt good about what I was seeing there once they finally like settled in with a solid rotation. And then it took a lot longer to come around on Sam. I probably say that probably didn't happen until that stretch in the final few weeks of the season into the playoffs where he was just playing great ball. Even like Carolina, the Niners game. I thought the back half of the second Rams game was good, stuff like that. So, and obviously the NFC Championship, I was like, oh, I'm sold. I even told Sam himself, I was like, yo, you're that guy. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. That's probably a lot longer than people would have thought that it took me to come around. But I was like, okay. And when I say come around, it's not like he's a good player. It's like, okay, you're the guy that can get them to the promised land. That was always the the thing for me. That's kind of how I based everything, because I knew that's how the organization viewed it. They signed Sam thinking he can get them to the promised land. So everything kind of came in stages. And I think the last thing I'll say on that is my brother. Well, we're not blood, but call him my brother. His birthday is in early February, first week of February, and we always usually plan a trip. Because that time of year in Seattle the weather is awful. So we go to like Vegas or Mexico or whatever. So usually we can start kind of planning that right after Thanksgiving, early December, when we find out whether I'm going to have to, cover the Super Bowl. For the last decade, it was just, all right, yeah, come on. Where are we going? Mexico, Vegas, whatever. This year, after the Thursday night game, which I believe was mid-December, I remember hitting the group chat that we got like, yeah, nah, I'm probably going to be busy that first week of September. I can't, if we plan something, I can't go. That's when I felt they're going to go to the Super Bowl. It was like right after that Rams game Thursday night, where I was like, yeah, guys, Mike can't go to Mexico February 5th or whatever. He's going to be in Santa Clara.
You see, if that was me, I'd be too afraid of cursing the team by by cancelling plans. I'd nearly be making the plans to to ensure that I don't put we call it the kibosh here in Ireland, the curse on them. But yeah, you seem to be confident that the tail end of the season. And to be fair to your point about Sam Darnold, I don't think you could be faulted for taking that long, because it was really only the playoff run where he really cleaned up the turnovers, and he really started taking care of the ball into that playoff run. So there seemed to be a dramatic change in him as they went through that playoff run. Like, we look at the Seahawks now as a team that, I mean, I won't say came out of nowhere. They built progressively, and by the time we got to the playoffs, I think everybody was confident that they were a team that could go all the way. But at the same time, they weren't a team that anybody was talking about being in a Super Bowl window. We talk about windows with like the likes of the Detroit Lions. We had Carmen Vitale on last week, and we were talking about windows and whether the likes of the Lions will get back again. And I mentioned the Seahawks as the team who saw the prize on the shelf and just took it, because you never know, you talk about the Lions, you never know when you're going to get back. And now the Seahawks they've climbed the mountain straight away. They've taken the prize when it was on offer. And now they have to deal with what comes in the aftermath of having a successful season, losing the likes of Kubiak, losing Boyan Maffey, losing Kobe Bryant, and so many other players. Has Mike Macdonald built a culture for sustained success? I mean, with all the players and with all the coaching staff that they're missing, are they a team that can run it straight back?
Yeah, I'm gonna read something here from my colleague Dan Pompey, who did a feature on Bears head coach Ben Johnson, and he spent like a day with Ben, went to the meetings and everything. I'm gonna read this. Okay, this is from Dan's story. It just came out today. After winning the North in his first season as head coach, Johnson has higher aspirations, much higher. Quote, "You've got 31 other teams coming to training camp saying our goal is to win the Super Bowl," he says. "I want more than that. I want to have the highest scoring offense ever," which happens to be the 2013 Denver Broncos. "I know how many points per game they scored, 37.9, and I want to surpass them. I want shutouts. I want blowouts." And then Dan also writes that Ben asks, "What's the team that had the most consecutive victories?" The answer is the Patriots across 2003 and 2004. They won 21 straight. Ben then says, quote, "Why can't we do that? There has never been an undefeated season since teams started playing more than 14 games. The moon is the Super Bowl, but we're shooting beyond that for the stars. And I want these players to feel that each and every single day they come in." And so I bring up that quote when you ask about Mike and his culture, is because I think Mike's culture noticeably is very different than what Ben is saying there. And not to say Ben's wrong per se, but I see actually more value in Mike's approach, where it's just like, I don't think we need to put those type of benchmarks in the minds of the people here. Like Mike Macdonald's whole thing is, as he said on Hard Knocks, let's be the best version of ourselves, whatever that looks like, because it'll evolve, and if we focus on that, I think it's easier to focus on the day-to-day of football when you make it that broad. Like, what's the best version of us? What style do we want to have? And not just like, let's be tougher than the other team. Well, duh. But like, what does our style of play look like, and how can we reinforce that? I think those things are like healthier in terms of like fostering sustained success. Because I feel like, so in Ben Johnson's example, right? Let's just, and I hate to pick on Ben, but let's just say they average 38 points a game this year, and then they don't win a Super Bowl. Then what?
Yeah.
You hit the goal. Now what? You know, those Broncos that led the league in scoring didn't win. They got their ass kicked by the Seahawks, you know, that year. So I think that, and also he said he wants shutouts and blowouts. So obviously, if you do that, you'll probably win the Super Bowl. But I just think that Mike's approach is a little healthier on the psyche. And you know, you saw that even last year where the Seahawks ended up being the number one scoring defense, and we asked guys about it, and they were just like, "Yeah, that's cool, I guess." But like, we don't measure. We know what the best looks like because it's on tape. You know, it's us. It's us freezing the frame when we're watching film, and there's 9 of us in the picture. Like, that's the best version of us. You know, whether that's after a 2-yard run or a 10-yard gain, like that. Like, there's a style to us. So I just think because Mike operates like that, it's easier to build on that when you're not just always chasing the ghost of someone else's accomplishments or your own accomplishments. You know, it's like, we got to be as good as we were in 2025 because that's when we won the Super Bowl, you know? So I actually think, yes, that's a long-winded way to answer your question. I believe in kind of the psychology or whatever behind how Mike is building that. Now, maybe the Bears win a Super Bowl and this looks dumb in like 6 months or whatever, but I just think that, like, if Ben Johnson asked me, I'd probably be like, I would tweak that a little bit and focus on like more of the process on becoming the best offense in the NFL, not necessarily the numerical value of it. I get the gist of what he's trying to say, but like, words matter, right? And how you frame things are very important. The difference between run it back and run it forward, for instance, I do think is pretty significant in terms of messaging. So, yeah, I think Mike's got the wording and the messaging and the culture part right.
I have to say, I haven't got to the full episodes of Hard Knocks yet, but just seeing little snippets, he seems to be so understated and so grounded in the way he interacts with players. You see a little bit of an interaction with himself, and again, I mentioned Nick Aminwari about, you know, talking about reacting to tweets and about being as you said, the best version of himself, and trying not to let any external factors influence his you know, his mindset. It just seems to be a very, very refreshing. He seems to be the type of guy you'd love to go to in a tough spot and ask for advice and not expect the hyperbole, as you said. And you're talking about stats. Ask Tom Brady and the 2007 Patriots what value they got out of going into a Super Bowl 16-0, and I think you'll get a quick answer. I think they would have happily lost a few along the way and to win the championship at the end. Is there any, so just looking around the league, is there any comp to last year's Seahawks? A team that you see building quietly, an understated team, building a culture that might breed that kind of success, that, you know, someone that we might not be looking at the moment?
Yeah, I think I've always believed that Brian Schottenheimer was going to make a good head coach. I believe that when he was a coordinator. I remember, like, in that 2020 Let Russ Cook season, like, writing about, them having to maybe replace Schotty because he's going to get a head coaching job, not because he would get fired 2 months later or whatever it was. So I don't know if the Cowboys will ever win the Super Bowl because, that you need good ownership for that. And Jerry Jones, like, teeters that. He goes back and forth between, like, kind of a crazy impulsive owner to, like, oh, I understand those moves that you just did. So, but to answer your question, like, I just believe kind of the same way I do with Mike Macdonald and like what Shoddy's building there. I don't know if the Cowboys will win again, but I just think they're good. I think they're built to be good perennially, even if they don't win it all. You mentioned like the Lions and their window, some other teams that come to mind in recent years about like the window, but like of being good, but not necessarily getting there. The Bills with McDermott before he just got booted. I think Lamar's Ravens are another good example. And then I think the other one that always is going to stand out because it's kind of when I entered the league and started paying attention more is those Drew Brees Saints from like 2017 to like 2020. Those rosters were really good. Look at those rosters were great. Yeah. Great. They probably should have obviously went to the Super Bowl in 2018, but yeah, 2017 roster was good because they drafted super well. That's the Kamara, Marshawn Lattimore draft, and they just built good teams. Drew Brees was still good there for still really good there for multiple seasons, and they never made the Super Bowl. Josh Allen still hasn't made it for all this crowning that's being done of him as like one of the best QBs of the modern era. Never made it yet. So Jalen Hurts has made it twice. And let the people in Mike Sando's QB tiers tell you Jalen stinks, basically. So yeah, I think I'm very interested to see how the Cowboys do. I think Shoddy's just built the right way. And I think it also helps he's a coach's kid. I think those guys and kind of inherently are better equipped to handle the job, especially if they were close with their father. Not everyone was, but you look at a Shanahan, or I think Clint Kubiak's going to eventually have some success for the same reasons. He watched Gary. Gary talks to him still every day. So, yeah, I think the Cowboys are one of like the underrated teams. If we had to guess, like dark horse, however you want to label
It's funny,
that. I think he just made up the right stuff.
We've had several guests on in the last week and a half, and you're the third that has mentioned the Cowboys as someone that they're very, very high on. So I think it is becoming quite a common opinion that the Cowboys are going to be good this year, and you look forward to seeing what as you said, hard to believe that they can go all the way when you talk about ownership and you talk about interference and things like that. But there might be a building sense that maybe this could be slightly different this season. Flipping that, is there a team that's being talked up a lot that you don't buy into, that you're not buying the hype and you're not buying stock in this season?
It's a good question. I mean, the team I see hyped the most is like the Rams, but I believe in that. And that's going to be a very good team, because they're coached really well. McVay has made of the right stuff as a guy. A lot of the culture stuff we're talking about with Macdonald, I think McVay's figured out a lot of through trial and error, losing a Super Bowl so early, just agonizing over it and having such a stinky season in 2022 that tested him, personally, getting married, becoming a dad. McVay's been through a lot, personally and professionally. So I think that's kind of hardened him in a good way. I'm trying to think of some other teams. I've kind of just been skeptical in general of the Bills. I just think that they kind of get in their own way, and I don't want to put it on like just Josh or just McDermott or just the defense, or just the offense. They just find a way to get in their own way quite a bit. And when it's tough because I'm one of those guys who has to see the coach do the thing, as in the big chair. If I don't know him, like I mentioned him with like Shoddy or Clint, people I've been around. So I'm a little skeptical of the hire. But yeah, I think a lot of like my skepticism also is just tied to like Josh is part of the reason they haven't made it too. So I guess
even last season, we forget about the the hero play that was not. I mean, like he had a very costly play that turned the ball over against the Broncos. Even last season, and you could go back and look through many seasons. I agree with you. Yeah, he's kind of a darling of the NFL. He doesn't probably get that kind of criticism too often, but as you said, it has been in his hands a few times, and he's coughed it up.
Yeah, and he's been let down by people around him too, like anyone has, like Lamar has too, like Patrick Mahomes has, So yeah, I just think the team getting hyped the most is the Rams. I don't have the Super Bowl odds in front of me right now, but they're probably pretty heavy favorites at this point. And I think they should be, them and the Seahawks. But yeah, I don't think anyone else is getting over talked too much. Yeah, it's probably just what's going on in Buffalo. And then I think individually, probably Caleb's. I'm curious to see how that goes because that guy completed like 55 or something % of his passes or something that started with a 5, and that's problematic. You got to fix that before I'm really sold on you. But I do think the Bears will have a really good season.
Yeah. I have 2 more quick ones for you before I let you go, Mike, and thanks so much for your time. First of all, young quarterback that you expect to make the biggest leap this year in going to second or third season.
Cam Ward. Off the top of my head, I don't know how. Trying to think of some other ones, but that's probably my favorite. I just thought he really impressed me in the game that they played against the Seahawks. And I'm not John Snyder. I'm not like, if you play well against the Seahawks, you're good. He loves signing and drafting guy or trading for guys who played well against his team. But I watched film before that game, and then watched him live. Then watched the film of that game. I think I watched one other game after that, maybe the Texans game. Maybe that might have been before, but I just saw the goods. I saw the stuff. I saw the right stuff. And then watching him on the quarterback show, Cam Ward that is out on Netflix. I was like, oh man, this guy's got the right stuff. They got to put the pieces around him. Like some guys, I just don't think the pieces. I just don't think they have it. You know, but he has it. You know, he's got to protect the ball a lot better. He fumbled it quite a bit, took a lot of sacks. Young guy stuff. You know, stuff that Sam did. You know, for instance. But I just think he's made of the right stuff upstairs, like mentally, physically. That's what, like, he's got the arm. He's elusive. He's tough dude. Accountable. You know, so yeah, I expect it. Not just because he's a Wazoo guy, but just watching him live, watching people live. I'll miss that. I guess I should have said during, like, I won't go to games as much at all anymore. And there is something different about like watching people live. Like there's some people who I'll just never forget seeing them live. Like even if I already knew they were good, like Christian McCaffrey, for instance, I knew he was good. Watching him hit the Seahawks for like 100 yards receiving and rushing in the same game or whatever he did in like 2019 or 2018 or whatever. It's like, oh my God, this dude's a deity. He's incredible. So yeah, I felt really good about watching Cam Ward. I think Titans fans should be more confident that they have their guy than like some of these other teams who recently drafted a quarterback, you know, like Atlanta or Carolina or some other team.
I think that's the reason I have Carnell Tate as my offensive rookie of the year. I think I agree with what you say. I think he has the tangibles and the intangibles, as you see from the quarterback documentary. Last one, Mike, we talked last year about JSN, whether he could be the guy, and he was absolutely lights out. So not non-quarterback to make an MVP run this year.
Ooh, that's fun. Non-quarterback to make an MVP run. Okay, help me out. Who would even be in this world?
I'm thinking of the likes of maybe a CD Lamb or even a Christian McCaffrey, because he's going to be so heavily leaned on this season with all the injuries again with the 49ers.
Yeah, I would say maybe like Jahmyr Gibbs.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it would have to be a running back because I feel like it's easier for their numbers to just be gaudy. You know, they can score rushing and receiving. I guess a receiver can too, but yeah, I would say probably Gibbs. I don't think the Falcons are going to win enough for that to even be a thing. Yeah, I'd probably go with Gibbs. It won't be a defensive player for sure. We're not advanced enough as a society to get there. We should be though. Yeah, I'll go Gibbs, Jahmyr Gibbs.
Okay. The Irish NFL show is brought to you in association with QuinnBet. So keep an eye out on our social pages for NFL specials, enhanced odds on NFL markets week to week. Please feel free to like, share, subscribe, and catch up on all of our content in the run up to the 2026 season, wherever you get your podcasts. Mike, we here at the Irish NFL show, we do our best to bring an Irish perspective to the game, or our perspective to an Irish audience, but it means so much to us when, you know, people like yourself who have eyes and ears on the ground take time out of your busy schedules to join us and give us your thoughts. So it is very much appreciated. We really, really love having you on the show. So thanks so much for coming on, and wish you every success with the book 12 as one, and your new role in the coming season with The Athletic. Thanks so much, Mike.
Appreciate you. Just because of you, I can sell books overseas, you know, so appreciate the love.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.